Hello, beautiful truth seekers of the interweb. Thank you for tuning in to my presentation today. It's a real honour to be talking here alongside some great speakers and researchers propagating the knowledge that can manifest true freedom. Isaac Newton's quote, "If I have seen further, it is from standing on the shoulder of giants," springs to mind. I'd like to thank Nate Cap for the title card that I've modified. And let's give a big thank you to Brandon and his team and family for putting this all together. So my name is Nathan Riddett and my presentation is entitled Entheogens, Empathy and Enlightenment. We'll be looking at true medicine, entheogens and their role in holistic health and freedom under natural law. So let's kick off with a couple of quotes. Instead of all this energy and effort directed at the war to end drugs, how about a little attention to drugs which will end war? Albert Hofmann, the Swiss chemist who synthesized LSD. The psychedelic experience is essential to understanding your humanness as having sex, or having a child, or having responsibilities, or hopes and dreams, and yet it is illegal. This is an outrage. It is a sign of cultural immaturity, and the fact that we tolerate it is a sign that we are living in a society as oppressed as any society in the past. So this is a red pill talk, and I'm sure you wouldn't have tuned in today if you weren't seeking the truth. However, a little bit of housekeeping before I really get going. Don't let my appearances or my pretentious limey accent affect how you take this information. Don't let it distract you from the veracity, and the same applies to how this information may make you feel. Do your own research. So, red pill or blue pill? Take your medicine and accept truth, or society's preference, escapism through alcohol, and masking your problems by taking demonic SSRIs that detach you from humanity, care, empathy, and even love. So the number one choice, the number one drug of the matrix is alcohol, from the Arabic body-eating spirit, which is also where the word ghoul derives. Colloquial terms such as spirits, devil's juice, what's your poison, pint of the old wife beater, mate. These terms come around for reasons. Alcohol is the destroyer of care, empathy and health, and is the real gateway drug to not so desirable or non-entheogenic substances, as entheogens are true medicine. So what is medicine? And it comes from medi, which means middle or centre point of balance, and sinus, which means ruin or destruction. So it brings balance to that which was or is in ruin. And what are entheogens and psychedelics? We have natural plant teachers, psilocybin mushrooms, ibogaine, peyote and ayahuasca. Ayahuasca contains DMT, which is in the vast majority of plants and animals. We produce it from our pineal gland. Crystalline DMT can be made through a basic chemical process, so it can be smoked or vaped, and it lasts a lot shorter period of time as well. So an ayahuasca brew could last 4 to 8 hours, where if you smoke DMT, you could go straight into a really deep experience and come out and be normal within 15 minutes. Some other synthetic entheogens would be LSD, MDMA and ketamine. So the word psychedelic comes from psyche, the mind, and delune, to make clear, literally to make the mind clear, to make sane, to sanitize. They help you to entertain alternative thoughts, different concepts with a different mindset, helps you question societal axioms, especially when considering natural law principles. They can help you cleanse the mind and soul of slave-think malware. In the image there we've got a peyote cactus. Holy communions. The word communion derives from com, which means with and together. munare, which means to build up, to strengthen, to fortify, and to protect. We've got psilocybin cubensis mushrooms there in the image. A holy sacrament, where the priest class are the only ones allowed to commune with God, and the masses just have to take their word for it. Sacrament comes from the word sacrum, which means holy and sacred, and mens mentis, the mind. And we've got the Amanita muscaria mushroom there. The word entheogen literally means to create the divine within. Entheogenare, genare the generative principle. And Dr. Rick Straussman, from his book The Spirit Molecule, when our individual life force enters our fetal body, the moment in which we become truly human, it passes through the pineal and triggers the first primordial flood of DMT. Later, at birth, the pineal releases more DMT. In some of us, pineal DMT mediates the pivotal experiences of deep meditation, psychosis, and near-death experiences. As we die, the life force leaves the body through the pineal gland, releasing another flood of this psychedelic spirit molecule. So interestingly, the sex organs and pineal gland appear in the gestation period in the womb around 49 days, the embryo. This is alongside the first release of DMT, which in Buddhism is also when the soul is purported to enter the body at 49 days. 7 times 7 is 49. I would also postulate that DMT actually aids in the soul's transition in and out of the human body, and this is based on science and anecdotal experience. So what do entheogens do? A simplified description of the action of the sacrament is that it dissolves the barrier to the unconscious mind, making the unconscious contents available. This can reveal buried painful memories and repressed feelings, values and drives as described by Freud, which parallel the human archetypes and collective unconscious postulated by Jung. Beyond these descriptions, vast ranges of mind becomes evident, including esoteric concepts of universal mind, remarkable floods of imagery, and an overwhelming source of fresh thoughts, intuition, and creative ideas. Ultimately, one can find at the heart of being an awesome source of light, energy, beauty, meaning, and unsurpassed love that is the revelation of divinity. Such discoveries have been described as reaching the supreme mystical experience of union with God. Here, the harmony, beauty, wholeness, and unity of all creation are self-evident. So, as many of us know, that our reality is a manifestation of our collective actions. It's a quantum manifestation, and our collective actions either manifest order or chaos. And this is based on the available information in our society, where natural law expressions aren't commonly known, unfortunately, which is why we're living in chaos, because collectively the generative polarity is fear, and that fear creates ignorance, a refusal of truth, instead of accepting natural law principles, which then in the polarity of fear leads to confusion internally, which is internal anarchy, which then leads to control externally. If you don't control yourself, if you don't have internal monarchy, you will be controlled externally. So this is where we're at collectively. Unfortunately, we do not know together, as what the real meaning of the word conscience means. Together, sciere, to know, which is also sciere is where the word science comes from, to know. Whereas at the moment, especially with this coronavirus scamdemic, that there's a lot of scientism going on. People being made to wear masks, for example, that actually say on the box that they don't work for viruses, but many other reasons why it's scientism and not true knowledge to know. It's not true science. So these plant teachers help us to say no with courage when we align with these natural law principles. And it is an inside job. It is all about internal change, the raising of one's own consciousness. This is what enlightenment is, knowing the objective difference between right and wrong human behaviour and acting and teaching accordingly, so that we all can know together that theft is wrong and government is slavery, and we can say no to it. But it's difficult to change, because most people spend a great deal of their day unconsciously feeling and thinking from past memories. They do this because they have hardwired those experiences by repeatedly thinking of them and by associating many other experiences with them. It makes sense that if most people maintain the same environment for long periods of their lives, where nothing new is happening or there is no change, the repeated stimuli will therefore produce the reactivation of associative neural networks, which will become more developed, strengthened and refined. As a consequence of that lack of novelty in their environments and experiences, they have become hardwired to their own worlds. No wonder change is so difficult. So, entheogens and psychedelics can help with this, because they actually help to break down the addiction pathways in the brain, and they help to forge new ones, and they help to regrow brain cells. I would also recommend taking lion's mane mushroom as a daily supplement for cognitive and brain cell regrowth benefits. Lion's mane isn't an entheogen, but if you are microdosing as well, then they work synergistically. There's many studies out there, especially people with post-traumatic stress disorder, that have benefited tremendously from this method. I've got a slide here of Paul Stament's protocol, taking between 0.4 and 1 gram of dried psilocybin mushrooms, along with lion's mane and niacin. And some good vegan sources of niacin would be peanuts and avocados. I've got a graphic here showing, it's a brain scan, showing someone taking a placebo on the left and psilocybin on the right, and this depicts the communication between brain networks. And as you can clearly see on the right, there's far more going on whilst you're on psilocybin. Your brain is a lot more active. There's a lot more communication between areas of the brain. Here's one with LSD, very similar. Here's some cropped news headlines or studies. New research provides evidence that a single dose of psilocybin can boost brain connections. Emotions and brain functions are altered up to 1 month after a single high dose of psilocybin. Psilocybin can occasion mystical type experiences, having substantial and sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance. Magic mushrooms could help ex-soldiers to overcome trauma. Well, obviously they shouldn't be an order follower joining the cult of ultimate evil in the first place, and then they wouldn't get post-traumatic stress. But before I digress, magic mushroom therapy found effective for treating depression. Experiences of ultimate reality or God confer lasting benefits to mental health. 1,000 mid-20th century scientific papers rediscovered in the 90s show evidence of the therapeutic value of psychedelics. One high dose of psilocybin was shown in a 2016 study to reduce depression symptoms, and 30% of patients taking Prozac or another psychiatric drug in the same category find it completely ineffective. How to change your mind, what the new science of psychedelics teaches us about consciousness, dying, addiction, depression and transcendence by Michael Pollan. And then there's a New Scientist cover page entitled Psychedelic Medicine. In Silicon Valley, they have been microdosing there for a while, and microdosing helps to reduce anxiety and irritability. It enhances cognitive functions and creativity, and provides a greater general sense of well-being and reduces the effects of aging. So with that, the previous slide in mind, where 30% of people found that antidepressants were highly ineffective, psychedelics won't heal you. They will show you the way. and you will heal yourself. So they work because they literally do the opposite of what antidepressants do. They make you face the issues that you've often held buried deep within yourself, rather than demonic SSRIs, antidepressants. They will mask those issues and how the human emotions. So psychedelics work because they do the opposite of how antidepressants do. You've got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide on a psychedelic experience. So in other words, they help you with the shadow work. Erosion of ego. Terence McKenna quote: "If the ego is not regularly and repeatedly dissolved in the unbounded hyperspace of the transcendent other, there will always be slow drift away from the sense of self as part of nature's larger whole. The ultimate consequence of this drift is the fatal ennui that now permeates Western civilization." So, possibly the greatest benefit of psychedelics, it's a massive benefit to the great work and accepting truth, because the human ego gets in the way. So much of this information and truth is ignored because of the human ego, and this is largely why people cannot accept truth or admit that they were wrong, or even entertain information that contradicts their worldviews and belief systems, because their hard-headed, calcified egos are defiant to truth and change. So it could be one of the greatest benefits. So they help with change. They help with erosion of ego, so we can accept truth. What else do? They can help generate courage. They can help to reduce fear and overcome fears. For the simple fact that you do need courage every time you embark on a psychedelic journey, because it is a journey into the unknown, and it's quite a natural, normal fear to have. I often have that fear before I'm about to go on a journey. As I said before, you've got nowhere to run. You've got to face your fears head on. And generating courage is something that we need, especially when it comes to speaking truth and not caring about others' opinions and potentially being ostracized. We need courage to say no righteously when it comes to people taking our rights and freedoms. We need courage to step into the sacred masculine self-defense principle and say no when people are violating those rights or threatening you with violence. So basically, they help with all of the stages and all of the steps of initiation. They help you to stop lying to yourself, because you can erode the ego and start to change to accept these truths, which is very similar to being in cognitive dissonance. They can help you come out of that. While studying the trivium and quadrivium, they help you to how to think. They help you to live in the present moment. When you're coming out the other side, you can feel quite humble, you can feel quite grateful, and that helps you to live in the present moment. They can also help you to activate the physical body, and I can speak from experience. Coming out the side of a mushroom trip, I normally only want to eat nuts and seeds and fruits. One time springs to mind when this organic mango was just divine. And I could really feel the connection with nature there. Terence McKenna: "Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behaviour and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong." So, they categorically help with these aspects of awakening and doing the great work. Yes, you can get there without them, but they can expedite the process. Books like the Kybalion can be very heady, some very heady concepts there. But taking entheogens before or after, probably not during reading it, but they can help you understand much deeper axioms like "as one suffer, all suffers." You know, in the psychedelic realm, you can deeply feel and understand this. I've got a screenshot here from Dennis McKenna's Free Your Mind conference in 2015. This is towards the end, and basically I'm going to summarise. He's asking the question, you know, what is the message from these plant teachers? Are we going to listen? Are we going to live alongside nature and develop true care and empathy and live alongside nature and in harmony with our laws, which would be the path of Isis, if you like, on the left? Or are we going to go down the path of Eris with the nuclear mushroom cloud there on the right, which is the path that we're on? Do check out that presentation if you haven't already. Empathy is another benefit. Anecdotally, I found plant teachers can amplify feelings and emotions. Empathy for me was something that kept being amplified, and it is important to have it, along with being honest to yourselves and being able to accept new information and assimilate that into positive change. Gratitude was something else that kept coming through, and humility. And all these benefits can help and result in holistic health and collective freedom. With this particular slide in mind, you know, we do get morons that might say, well, food is just food, or, well, animals eat animals, and all the other dross that gets regurgitated by the ignorati. You know, humans have a neocortex, which differentiates them between animals, which helps us with higher order thinking, and we can contemplate the morality of what we eat, whereas animals wouldn't. You know, a lion wouldn't contemplate the morality of eating the gazelle. Not just that, but obviously they're biologically designed to do so with the teeth and the fangs and the digestive system and everything else. Before I digress too much down that path, I'm getting to my point that perhaps psychedelics can help people to understand the law of correspondence with regards to animals and the empathy there, you know, where you, like this slide says, if you think this baby doesn't deserve more rights than a potato, you are a psychopath. And that's where the empathy may come in. With the law of correspondence, you know, to think that we're going to be free all the whilst we enslave another species and dominate them, you know, is the religion of ultimate domination, the consumption of their flesh and taking their lives which aren't ours to take. You know, it's not self-defense, is it? So it's not survival, so we shouldn't do it. But we're never going to be free all the whilst we support this, and you can glean a much deeper feeling and understanding of this on psychedelics. One doesn't have to operate with great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and understanding are sufficient. This is basically heart-based intelligence, you know, the two pillars of enlightenment, the sacred masculine and sacred feminine. You need to know right from wrong, and then you need to have the care to live accordingly, to align with that. So you need to know with the mind and have the care with the heart. Opinion is really the lowest form of human knowledge. It requires no accountability, no understanding. The highest form of knowledge is empathy, for it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. It requires profound purpose, larger than self kind of understanding. So I want to look at the history of psychedelics here. Here's a map. This is just based on where psilocybe, the genus psilocybe mushrooms grow, and they are found on all continents except Antarctica. Of these, Europe and the Americas are strongly represented. Psilocybe species are distributed across tropical, subtropical and temperate climates, with a large range of species in Latin America. And as plant teachers grow on virtually all but the harshest environments all over the world since time immemorial, can be traced back to Pangaea, I'd contend that they had more involvement in the sharp, unexplainable leap from a primate's brain to a human one. Science cannot explain how that very sharp growth happened. And it's not in line with Darwinian theory. 23 primates eat mushrooms. Humans have been eating mushrooms for as long as humans have been around. The stoned ape theory, to me, has much more credence than the Darwinian one. It makes perfect sense that primates and early man would have consumed psychedelics whilst hunter-gathering. Depending on levels of consumption, they would have experienced sight and auditory enhancements. In higher doses, spiritual experiences. They would have experienced reduction of fear, more courage and empathy, and these are leadership qualities. This occurs millions of times over millions of years, and this would trigger epigenetic neurogenesis. Combined with what we know about how psychedelics affect the brain, it makes perfect sense that entheogens were the catalyst for this unexplained jump in evolution, and they can still help us to evolve. Hunter-gatherer societies over hundreds of thousands of years, through feasts and famines, all plants would have been consumed at some point. Our ancestors played Russian roulette to discover which ones were nutritious, poisonous, or intoxicating. This led to shamanism, who used these special and sacred plants to achieve altered states in consciousness. The word shaman, a shaman, is someone who can see in the darkness. As much as entheogens have roots in virtually all cultures and religious practice, here we can see that it comes into pop culture. Terence McKenna. Skywalker is a direct translation of the word shaman out of the Tungisic, which is where Siberian shamanism comes from. So these heroes that are being instilled in the heart of the culture are shamanic heroes. They control a force which is bigger than everybody and holds the galaxy together. I'm going to talk a little bit about shamanism. Skywalker here with the green lightsaber being taught by Green Yoda, who is already in balance. So opposed to the Empire, who are still acting in ego and ignorance and domination and narcissism, typically use a red lightsaber. Not like Obi-Wan, who has taken his battle into the spiritual realms with the blue lightsaber. We have Luke Skywalker with the green lightsaber as soon as he has completed his training, and you have his head in the stars and feet on the ground and being balanced in the middle of the light spectrum there. So it's a spiritual allegory. From Jeremy Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent, which is a very good read. According to my hypothesis, shamans take their consciousness down to the molecular level and gain access to biomolecular information. By what actually goes on in the brain, mind of an ayahuasquero when this occurs. What is the nature of a shaman's communication with the animate essences of nature? The clear answer is that more research is needed in consciousness, shamanism, molecular biology, and their interrelatedness. Shamanism is an ancient tradition from many parts of the world. The shaman reaches altered states of consciousness either through dance, endurance, fasting, extremes of temperature, and ingestion of entheogens. Under this altered state, the shaman can interact with other intelligences from the spirit world or other dimensions. The word shaman means one who sees in the dark. Shamans were considered way showers, or those who were capable of showing people the way out of darkness and chaos and into light and knowledge. From entropy to prosperity, they were those who attained understanding of both the forces of the human psyche as well as the forces inherent in nature, natural law, and who used that knowledge for the benefit, healing, and uplift of the community or human consciousness as a whole, like any true adept. Just pick up there on showing people the way out of darkness, which is where the word education comes from, educare, to lead out of. But we don't have education in the government indoctrination centres, surprise to surprise, teaching moral relativism, solipsism, and blind obedience to authority, and the worship of paper slave tokens called money. Many shamanic cultures throughout time have employed a system of moral education, the teaching of natural law principles to their young. In such an education system, it is deemed unacceptable for the young not to learn the objective difference between right and wrong human behaviour at an early age. A small percentage of those who proved unable or unwilling to learn such moral sensibilities during their childhood may often be ostracised from the shamanic culture upon reaching adulthood. Such child-rearing methods are one of the many reasons that shamanic cultures often display extremely low levels of crime and mental illness compared to other cultures. You know, you wouldn't want to be ostracised and expelled into the jungle on your own or the desert, so most people are aligned. Historically, shamans have always been part of the society where they lived, taking care of its problems whenever they were allowed to operate. For centuries, shamanic cultures have been persecuted in the Western world until they were almost entirely exterminated. They have managed to survive in secrecy or through complex esoteric camouflage. Nowadays, there seems to be more freedom, and this ancient knowledge can re-emerge and be used in our own cultural context and not relegated somewhere else. The world needs shamans able to function on the roads among the electronic equipment and energies in the squares and markets of our contemporary society. It's from Franco Santoro's book Astro Shamanism. So looking at history, we can go back as far as 6 to 9,000 BC, where there's evidence here. The mushroom shaman, a being depicted with the head of a bee, covered in mushrooms, bearing handfuls of mushrooms. We can see ancient cave paintings from North Africa, Spain and Australia, dating back as far as 4,000 BC. You can see there mushrooms and other psychedelic art. Ancient Mesopotamia, in Gilgamesh and the Plant of Immortality. In Babylon, they used mandrake and cannabis, and this was mentioned in the cuneiform tablets. We have ancient mushroom cults. Around 3,700 to 3,600 BC, there's evidence of peyote use in ceremonies. In Central America, 1300 to 1500 AD, there's evidence of Aztecs consuming mushrooms, which were referred to as the flesh of the gods. In Europe, around 1500 AD, there's Christian art depicting mushrooms. Was Jesus a magic mushroom? In the Cometian tradition, in ancient Egypt, the blue lotus tea enjoys a fascinating history dating back throughout ancient Egypt, who used it as an aphrodisiac, a sleep aid, and for lucid dreaming, along with its psychoactive effects. The plant was so integral to Egyptian society it makes several appearances in the Book of the Dead. Today the plant is listed as endangered and can be found mostly on the Asian continent. While it's not a tea you can go out and buy in most countries, it is a fascinating plant that demonstrates the role tea has played in societies since earliest civilizations as well. The ancient Egyptians may have also used psychoactive plants in their temples. The only fully confirmed plant is the blue lotus, but there's a story of the tree of life, which is the Acacia nilotica, which contains significant amounts of DMT. Some of the hieroglyphics, one pictured here, also gives us a hint that psilocybin mushrooms might have been used in their rituals. This may explain the importance of cows and scarabs in ancient Egyptian mythology, Magic mushrooms grow on cow excrement, and scarabs tend to roll this along the ground. And in Eastern cultures, they revere the cow, the holy cow, and quite likely where the term holy shit originated. Zoroaster and Zoroastrianism, using psychedelic brew called Huma, and Mithraism, the pagan mystery religion, used psychedelic sacraments. In ancient Rome, we have the Lotus Eaters, and in the Odysseus, in the Iliad, this was the first stop in the story. The first stop was the island of the Lotus Eaters. This again is another spiritual allegory where their journey began with the consumption of a psychedelic plant. Bottom right, we have Persephone and her mother Demeter admiring each other's mushrooms. The former's mythical abduction by Hades underlies the fertility rite which ultimately became the psychedelic celebrations at Eleusis, as described in Psychedelia by Patrick Lundborg. There were the Delphic oracles, where visions and prophecies were obtained by inhaling intoxicating gases from a hydrocarbon vent and smoking laurel leaves. Similar to the prophetess of Rome, the symbol of Rome, who lived in a volcanic cave in southern Italy, who inhaled these gases and prophesied. The Eleusinian mysteries and the Kakion, which is a brew drunk in a ceremony in a darkened space, with the burning of herbs and the banging of drums in Eleusis. We have Pythagoras. Pythagoras spent decades studying in Egypt, Persia and Greece, and became the first orator, philosopher, magician and astrologer of the day. He's often credited being the father of math, music and geometry. He was trained in the Zoroastrian tradition by the Magi, the greatest magicians and astronomers of their time. The Magi drank milk mixed with cannabis as their primary sacrament and medicine. In the ancient mysteries of Dionysius, Orpheus and Bacchus, at some point involved the consumption of psychedelics, especially the cult of Mithras, which heavily influenced and ultimately transformed into Christianity. We have the pagan mystery times, where people across the countryside consumed psychedelic plants to enter mystical states. Witchcraft and witches' weeds, the ones that you shouldn't touch or shouldn't consume, henbane, deadly nightshade, mandrake and datura, all affect the same brain receptor, the Muscarinic Receptor. This is where the classic psychedelic plant Amanita muscaria gets its name. So even though these pagan mystery and witchcraft devotees lack neuroscience, they found substances that all hit the same receptor. And as outlandish as it may sound, allusions to the entheogenic properties of the acacia are commonplace in Masonic literature and various rituals. In the slideshow image, you can see the third tracing board, I believe, with the acacia sprig there above the coffin underneath west. So it would appear that the psychoactive nature of acacia was fairly widely known in certain Masonic circles, at least up until the late 1700s. In their daring book, Mushrooms, Myth and Mithras, authors Ruck, Hoffman and Kelderon made a bold attempt to interpret the founding myth of Freemasonry in an entheobotanical context, seeing in the allegory of Grandmaster Hiram Abiff's raising a possible allusion to a ritualized harvest of acacia root. There is more spirituality in a single psychedelic plant than in all the churches of the world combined, because religions have psychedelic origins. The heart of religions contain the esoteric truths of being at one with God. We are all one. That God within expresses itself across all religions and religious cults, and are likely obtained through psychedelics. In the Vedas, the same word soma is used for drink, the plant and its deity. Drinking soma produces immortality. And the Amrita Rigveda, the consumption of soma by human beings is well attested in Vedic ritual. It was composed. The Rig Veda was composed more than 5,000 years ago, and in it says, "We drank soma, we became immortal, we came to the light, we found gods." The Iranians call it Huma in the sacred Avesta. Soma means to press out and extract. Ancient Sanskrit text describes the lotus plant as soma, so it's quite likely that it was the lotus that was being extracted. In the Tantras, the use of datura and cannabinoids. Datura grows out of the chest of Shiva, and Shiva smoked charas, which is cannabis, for 1,000 years and became God. In Buddhism, Buddha was seeking enlightenment and was meditating for months and got emaciated under a tree, but it wasn't until a girl gave him a milky drink which refreshed him, and then bang, as in Bangladesh, as in cannabis, he found his enlightenment. Padmasambhava, sorry if I butchered that name, brought Tantric Buddhism from India to Tibet, and that name means lotus born. Indian Tantras use psychedelic drugs extensively. Taoism from Siberian Shamanism became Chuen, aka Zen, in Japan. So the shaman originated in southern Siberia, and he predominantly used the fly agaric mushroom, the Amanita muscaria, as depicted in the slide by their dress. Note the Santa looking dude on the left for later. In Judaism, in the Old Testament, if you eat the fruit from the center of the garden, your eyes will open and you'll be like God. This is not just a psychedelic allegory, but one about knowledge too. The burning of a psychedelic plant gave Moses visions of God, and manna from the book of Exodus, which is white like coriander seed. It looked like resin and tasted of wafers made of honey. It could be DMT, it could be some sort of cannabinoid. They could have used honey to mask the alkaloid taste, but quite likely it's dried mushrooms. The Israelites ate the manna and looked east and felt the presence of Yahweh. From Mithraism to Judaism, through paganism into Christianity, the psychedelic element in the rituals were replaced and banned. They were replaced with alcohol and a tax collection system. The cantankerous old women were hunted out as and portrayed as wicked witches, as were the pagan mystery religions rooted out. This is early prohibition against psychedelic plants. In Islam, we have the Ishmaeli and the Hashin sect, which were the assassins who used hash. In one hadith, Muhammad said, "The apostle of Allah said, 'Come with us to the house of Aisha.' So he went with the apostle to the house of Aisha. He asked her to bring food, and she brought hashish, and we ate hashish." Eating hash often leads to deeper and more psychedelic states as opposed to smoking it. Rastafarianism. Rastas have been using cannabis for relaxation, meditation, introspection, ceremony and health benefits since the 1800s. And you know, if I ever got caught, I can always say that I've got a few Bob Marley CDs and a Rasta wig, so you know, I might get off. The order followers might let me off. Okay, bad joke. Looking at history and the religious links, it's a fairly comprehensive tapestry being portrayed that psychedelics are a foundation in world religions and esoteric axioms like we are all one. So let's now look at Western philosophy and psychedelics. In Plato's Phaedo, the philosopher says he was inspired by the Eleusinian mysteries, which, as I've discussed, is an ancient religious ceremony where participants took kakion. It's quite a radical conjecture that Western philosophy was triggered by the intake of psychedelics, because Plato's philosophy was inspired by psychedelic intake, and Western philosophy was inspired by Plato, arguably the father of philosophy. We also have Thomas de Quincey, who's famous for his book Confessions of an Opium Eater. We have the chemical philosopher Humphrey Davy, who invented the miner's safety lamp known as the Davy lamp. He was an advocate of idealism, where matter is but a perception of the mind from experiences bequeathed to him by nitrous oxide. We have Frederick Nietzsche, who's a very good philosopher who frequently took opium, chloral and many other drugs. We have William James. Psychedelics did not only help to inspire metaphysical cosmology for James, they also allowed him to claim comprehension of the cosmology of the German dialectical idealist Hegel. Henry Bergson is quoted by saying, "If you want to understand consciousness, you've got to study psychedelics." We've got some more notable psychedelic orientated philosophers there I don't have time to go into. We have Alan Watts and his quote, "The psychedelic experience is only a glimpse of genuine mystical insight, but a glimpse which can be matured and deepened by the various ways of meditation in which drugs are no longer necessary or useful. If you get the message, hang up the phone. For psychedelic drugs are simply instruments like microscopes, telescopes and telephones. A biologist does not sit with eye permanently glued to the microscope. He goes away and works on what he has seen." And I agree, and I can relate, but I would also add that, as Terence McKenna says, it's still beneficial to merge with the infinite from time to time, because we do get attached to this physical experience. It's still beneficial to microdose for cognitive and holistic health benefits. Timothy Leary was a strong advocate of psychedelics, and in 1964 he co-authored a book called The Psychedelic Experience, where it says, "A psychedelic experience is a journey to the new realms of consciousness. The scope and content of the experience is limitless, but its characteristic features are the transcendence of verbal concepts, of space-time dimensions, and of the ego or identity. Such experiences are enlarged consciousness, can occur in a variety of ways: sensory deprivation, yoga exercises, discipline, meditation, religious or aesthetic ecstasies, or spontaneously. Most recently, they have become available to anyone through the ingestion of psychedelic drugs such as LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, etc. Of course, the drug does not produce the transcendent experience, it merely acts as a chemical key. It opens the mind, frees the nervous system of its ordinary patterns and structures, I learned more about my brain and its possibilities and more about psychology in the 5 hours after taking these mushrooms than I had in the preceding 15 years of studying and doing research in psychology." Aldous Huxley, English writer and philosopher of over 50 books, most notably for his dystopian novel A Brave New World. After his experience on mescaline, he wrote The Doors of Perception, We have Terence McKenna as well, an American ethnobotanist and mystic who advocates for the responsible use of naturally occurring psychedelic plants. He spoke and wrote about a variety of subjects surrounding entheogens, shamanism, culture, and much more, and was quoted, "I think by creating art, man was not put on this planet to toil in the mud, or the God who put us on this planet to toil in the mud is no God I want to have any part of. Some kind of Gnostic demon, it's some kind of cannibalistic demiurge that should be thoroughly renounced and rejected. By putting the art pedal to the metal, we really, I think, maximise our humanness and become much more necessary and incomprehensible to the machines." Which leads nicely to Alex Gray, who isn't a philosopher, he's an artist, but he's worth a mention. And this is a piece of his artwork called Gaia, and he portrays the psychedelic realm and experience very well in his art. Just finishing off, I want to include this special section, Psychedelic Christmas, where, if you remember the Santa-looking dude, the Siberian shaman, we look at an Amanita muscaria mushroom and Santa Claus. We can see the same colours are used, and the white beard. If you look on the underside of the mushroom cap there's a white frill. There are shiny mushrooms growing under trees, which is where we get the idea of putting presents under the trees. The shaman used to hang mushrooms over the fire so maggots would come out, and so it also dried the mushroom. This is where we get the pinning of the red and white stocking on the fireplace. Or the shaman used to hang them on trees to dry, hence where we get the decorated Christmas tree from. They used to, or they do still rather, feed reindeers Amanita muscaria mushrooms, and they then drink the reindeer urine, because this reduces the toxicity, hence flying reindeers. Also, the shaman used to deliver their dried mushroom during the winter solstice, or the Christmas period, to their neighbours, and as they typically live in very low level abodes and are often snowed in, apparently the shaman dropped their mushrooms down the chimney. We also have Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer and his glowing red nose, the most noted reindeer who led the pack. This could be another spiritual allegory of being guided on a spiritual journey through taking a holy sacrament. We have helper elves, and they could be hallucinations or encounters with other entities in the other dimensions. And then just finishing off now, a man moved near a river and, wanting to find a way to travel across the water, spent 10 years forming a type of levitation that would allow him to float across it. Buddha, who was preaching in town, was confronted by this man, who said, "Look, master, look what I've achieved. I can walk across the water." Buddha said, "Yeah, but the ferry only costs a nickel." So I can as I mentioned before, we can reach true enlightenment without taking psychedelics, but as I've discussed in this presentation, they can expedite and aid in the process. They can help us reach true enlightenment, which is the embody of the two pillars of enlightenment of do no harm and take no shit. This is an understanding of natural law. That's what enlightenment is. It's not being able to meditate and levitate. It's understanding the objective difference between right and wrong behaviour in humans, and that if you aren't causing harm or loss to another, if you aren't lying, you aren't threatening, then you're not doing anything wrong. That's enlightenment. And remember, there's only one mistake you can make on the path to freedom, And that's not being a vegan anarchist. So remember, don't worry about man's law. You own yourself. You own your consciousness to take your medicine. But take it consciously. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, guys and girls. You take true care. Thank you.